Welcome back to Our Street. Lynn Fisher here today with my buddy Kurt Elder. Kurt, how are you doing?
Len, I'm well. I'm looking forward to today's conversation, and yeah, let's just jump into it.
Okay. Well, I think our guest is a first-time guest here on the show. Welcome, Mary Choate. Mary is the executive director of Center for Legal Immigration Assistance. So, how are you doing, Mary?
Great. Excited for the holidays.
All right. Well, Mary, why don't, if you would please tell our listeners about yourself. Um, Start from the beginning, give us some background, and tell us how you came to be in your position.
Oh, well, it started in 2017. But I'm going to be as short as possible. So
Well, give us plenty of background. We want to know where you're from and all that. So,
okay. I'm originally from Tennessee. I went to law school in Boston at the Northeastern School of Law. And then I came back to Tennessee and I was looking for jobs, and I found a job opening at Center for Legal Immigration Assistance doing like working with refugees, specifically Yazidis in the Yazidi community. So I was working with them and helping them apply for citizenship, getting their green cards and or legal permanent resident status. So I started off in 2017 doing that, and that's where I got the job. And I moved literally after a week. I got the offer because I was really excited to get an offer out of law school. It's your first real job, so you're like really excited about it. So I moved after a week, and then I kind of put all my stuff in a car with my partner at the time. He's now my husband. And we just moved to Nebraska from Tennessee. And first time being in Nebraska, by the way, never been there before. People from Tennessee thought I was a little crazy. Um, but I come to find out that Nebraska is kind of cool. I really like it here. It's amazingly like diverse. A lot of people in Tennessee said, "Oh, well, you're just going to see the same people," and I'm like, "No, it's not. It's quite a melting pot, really. And different cultures, specifically in Lincoln, but there's also different cultures and different ethnicities around Nebraska." And so that's how I landed here. And eventually in 2021, our executive director retired, who founded the organization. And then I decided to take over. Mostly, I don't know. I think I was really dedicated to the organization at that point. And I thought I could do a really good job. And so far, I think I have. It's been like 3 years. I'm still learning things about the position. I'm still learning things about the community. And I find everybody so nice and accepting. And it's something I just really love about the city.
tell us about the
Cool.
organization. When did it start, and
Yeah.
how is it funded, and all that?
Yeah, so CLIA actually was founded in 2001. It was founded based on the fact that there was basically an immigration law desert in Nebraska at the time. What that means was there was a lack of attorneys to help immigrants with services. And the big problem with this is that you see a lot of people going to people who are not licensed, and they're doing bad legal work, getting people into hot water that they shouldn't be in, that sort of thing. And so our former executive director created CLIA because he wanted to meet that gap in services. He then, and that was with United Methodist of Ministries. It was a specific church. And then in 2011, that's when we became incorporated as a nonprofit, and kind of separated from that. So we technically have been doing this for over 20 years, but nonprofit wise, we've been here since 2011. And our whole goal was to provide comprehensive legal services to immigrants and refugees. And that was the main mission, and we have done that for the past 20 years.
What I found interesting, perhaps whether it's you told me or I read it someplace, but you do more than just that. You also provide mental health services, other things
Yeah.
like that. Is there a broader basket that CLIA aids the community and then your clientele with?
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to start with that, because that's what we began with, but we slowly expanded to doing other services we wanted to meet our clients' needs in different ways. So we included mental health services because it tied really well with our victims of crime, because they needed mental health services in order to get legal help. Oftentimes we would help people who are victims of crime. So these are victims of sexual assault, human trafficking, that's sex trafficking and labor trafficking, domestic violence, and even different types of victims. And it would make it difficult to serve them with legal services without somebody accompanying them that could provide that mental health help. So that's why we expanded. And then a lot of times we have to do a narrative, which, by the way, an attorney doing a victim narrative is really hard. So we would have the mental health person help with that because they would also not be re-traumatizing the victim like we would be if we would to do a narrative like that. Because oftentimes it re-traumatize a victim of crime when they have to do a narrative. And so that's why we expanded to those services. And then we also expanded to doing other types of services with Uplift as well. Because beginning, we just focused on immigration, but then we went to Uplift because we saw, at the time, we saw a really big gap with immigrants, specifically people, regardless of their documentation status, not getting help or getting taken advantage of by like landlords and we wanted to see if there's a way to partner with community centers to help that need. So we partnered with Legal Aid, Agent Center, Good Neighbor, and El Centro to provide that. And then our particular part is that we have a part-time attorney go to El Centro where they provide advice in limited scope, but they provide advice for landlord and tenant issues, benefits issues, debt issues, family law issues. It kind of is really broad, but it kind of expanded to that as well, besides just immigration.
Tell us a bit about the structure. I know it is more than just you. You have said that there's some staff attorneys. Can you talk and tell us a little bit more about staff size, board size, and then what's your client population size? And not so much who you're serving, but how big is the need for your organization?
Oh yeah, of course. So we serve about I would say 500 to 1,000 per year. It really depends on how much staff we have at that time. I'm also kind of regulating on how much cases somebody takes as well in the office, just because I there's a lot of research done on burnout, and also you want to make sure that attorney or representative is dedicated to that case and they're not distracted by other cases. So you also don't want to overburden a representative attorney with those types of cases. Now we have 8 people in the working for the organization, which is a big change from what it was a couple of years ago. We had like 4 people. So we have expanded over the past few years. And then we also, our board is undergoing, basically we had our strategic plan. So we have 6 members, but we are trying to increase that just based on our strategic plan that we had this year. So we are diversifying our board, adding more members, that sort of thing. And then by next year, we should have a few more members. I'm hoping at least 8, but it's probably going to be more than that just because that's something our strategic plan focused on. We have people who are accredited representatives with the Department of Justice. I do have to explain what that means just because it's a little bit different because people know what an attorney is. They hear an attorney, they know what this is. Accredited representatives are able to do immigration paperwork with USCIS, so immigration. They're accredited with the DOJ. They have to have, it's basically like an apprenticeship. They have to have observed a certain amount of cases under the supervision of an attorney or another accredited representative. And they have to have a 40-hour course and also pass a test. And then they have to pass all the checks with the DOJ as well, Department of Justice. So that's what an accredited representative is. And then if you're fully accredited, you can do immigration court. So just to explain kind of like what that is. So we have 3 partial and 1 full. And then we have our part-time attorney with Uplift, Robin. And then we have two administrative staff. So, and then we have contractors that we contract out to, like our mental health therapist group. So that's in addition to that as well. And then we also have our interpreters that we contract out to as well.
Can you explain to me a typical case or situation? Someone comes to you, what is their status and what do they need?
Depends. Do you want a complicated case or a simple case?
Well, an average one.
Average one. Okay.
Average case.
All right. I'm gonna try. So let's say if you have somebody who is undocumented, and let's say they may have come either recently or a long time ago. Um, and sometimes the circumstances of which they come are not that nuanced. A lot of times people think it's complicated. A lot of times they just wanted to take care of their family. And or they were fleeing from a bad situation. I've had situations where they fled from domestic violence, for example. So let's say you had a lady who entered maybe 5 years ago who fled from domestic violence, and she comes to our door, and this is a very similar client. And she comes to our door through a victims advocacy agency, let's say Voices of Hope or Friendship Home or something similar. And she's suffering a domestic violence situation with her significant other. So it's not her husband or spouse. It's usually an intimate partner or something like that. And let's say she was sexually assaulted by this person and she reported the crime and she did everything that she was supposed to. She would meet with me or a representative or an attorney and just go over kind of like what she needs to do in order to get documentation status. Now, what that means is very different depending on the situation. If it's a victim of a crime and it's based on what I'm telling you, she may qualify for something called a U visa. And U visas are very specific in the law. They can only approve 10,000 per year. There's about 200,000. I'm underestimating this, by the way. 200,000 that are currently waiting for this visa. So if you kind of do the math on that, it's going to be a long wait time. So wait times for this can be 10 years plus. So they apply for a U visa, but then they have to wait for 10 years to get a visa. And sometimes they don't even have a work card during this process. It was supposed to be fixed with the bona fide determination that Biden set. So these people were going to get work cards, but we don't know if that's going to happen in the next term. So if she were to come in today, I would be like, so you basically can apply for this visa, but it's going to take you 10 plus years. And if you have kids stuck in another country, there may be a way to get them here, but it's going to take maybe a little bit more time than just immediate. So if let's say they had to leave somebody behind, that's going to take time to get that person together with them. So that will take maybe a couple of years. And then you have to kind of like also tell them, hey, but during this time, you may or may not have a work authorization. So you're still going to be considered undocumented, but you're going to have this case pending for you. So you can stay. It's just like it's going to be difficult for you to be able to live. And that's something that I think the federal government really needs to fix. But I would break it down for them best I can, and I would make sure they understand. And when I'm in a consultation with somebody, I always ask them, I was like, well, did you understand what I said? And usually they say yes. And I'm like, well, can you break it down for me what I said? And they're like, no, can you explain it again? And then I'll explain it. And I'll take as long as I need to, and anybody in the office will take as long as they need to explain it to this client. So that's just an average case that we will see. And we see a lot of complicated cases. So that's pretty much I would say, average victim case that we see.
So just on that average victim case, before we get to the half, and in the second half, we're going to get more into some of these.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need an attorney? Are you the right place? Some more examples. But in this example, hypothetical, if someone's waiting that 10 years to get this visa, they're undocumented. Can they be deported during that time if they have a case pending? How's that all work out?
Typically with U visas that are pending, typically, I'm gonna say typically, air quotes here, they often are not priority for deportation. Um, if you have an attorney with court, and what I usually do is I just tell them that they have a case pending, and they just hold off on determining whether or not they're removed. But those policies are also set by administrations coming in. So new administrations can have different policies regarding that. It really just depends on that administration and also depends on the area. So let's say if they are in removal proceedings currently, they would basically, we'd have to hold off on their decision. But let's say if you have a new administration that says, no, 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 we need to decide these, they're going to set them up with the court date and decide them pretty much immediately, depending on the administration's policies. But typically in the past, they haven't been deported like that because they've not been a priority.
All right. Thank you, Mary. We're going to take a short break. So we want our listeners to stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
You dig it?
This is KZUM Lincoln and KZUM HD.
Can you dig it?
The Lincoln Bike Kitchen works to provide anyone in our community with the resources to build and maintain a functioning bicycle. The all-volunteer cooperative promotes bicycling as a fun, environmentally friendly, and economical way to get around. If you're interested in donating bikes or parts, volunteering, or obtaining a refurbished bicycle, the Bike Kitchen is located at 1635 South 1st Street and on the web at lincolnbikekitchen.org.
Welcome back. Lynn Fisher and Kurt Elder here today having a conversation with Mary Choate. She is the executive director of the Center for Legal Immigration Assistance, or CLIA. And so before the break, Mary, you were kind of giving us a description of a typical case. And Kurt had a follow-up, but I just wanted to dive in a little deeper. So for somebody who's undocumented and you're helping them out, there's a new administration coming in, and you expressed some concern about the potential change in policy. What are your main concerns? You think there were going to be a lot more efforts to deport some people, and relate it directly to anybody who's been involved with any criminal activity?
Yeah, so my main concern, and I should add that in our agency, we can't serve, because we serve victims of domestic violence and victims of sexual assault. We can't serve people who, it's just a policy because with legal services, you can have a conflict of interest. So we can't serve people who commit violent crimes. But because of just conflict of interest that would come in with domestic violence stuff. So we want to make sure that we can serve our victims of crime. Now, in terms of a client explaining that to them, we'd have to really break it down because there is plans in the new administration to do mass deportations. Of course, there's a lot of unknowns right now on what that would look like, but we are aware of their plans. They've made it quite clear, but whether or not they can actually do those plans is really up to kind of like what happens at that moment. But it's good to be prepared, and that's what I tell my clients. So I'll go over everything with them in terms of what they can do and other options. Like for example, if there's other legal pathways they can take, I'll take those before I take the longer road, for example. Anything that's easier, but sometimes the only option is this option. That's the only thing they can do. Now, I'll prepare them as much as possible about what they need to watch out for in terms of documentation stuff. So, for example, if you're a pending U visa client, I would have you carry around your receipt notices, that sort of thing. If you were stopped by a law enforcement officer or you were stopped by ICE, that's Immigration Customs Enforcement, just in case, and they might just let you go because you have that pending case. It's all about knowing your rights as a client as well and being prepared. As long as you're prepared. And I should add that courts are so backlogged, and with these mass deportations, I think they could even be more backlogged because I have cases that are not going to be seen until 2028. And those are people freshly in removal proceedings. So I don't see how that's going to play out well because they still have to have court proceedings, especially if they're going to be placed in removal proceedings.
Well, I'm just curious if there's I mean, it sounds like it's a long, complicated process no matter what
Mhm.
people are facing. So if they're is there a difference between someone who's newly arrived as an undocumented person or someone who's been here for many years? Does that make any difference?
It can. There are special forms of reliefs for somebody who's newly arrived versus somebody who's been here for a very long time. There's cancellation or removal that you can try, for example, but you have to meet a specific criteria. Now, I'd have to remember what that criteria is because I don't remember right now because it's in the moment. but there's certain things, certain types of relief that you can use uh for people who've been here a while, but it's very specific. And it's also very hard to win these decisions, especially in immigration court. Now newly arrived people, they can of course apply for asylum, and that's their right to do so. It's within the law, especially if they meet their criteria for asylum. But even if you meet the criteria for asylum and you're going in front of immigration court, there's a problem with that too, because Omaha is one of the worst in terms of decision rates for asylum cases. And it's very important to look at decision rates. There's a Syracuse University, I think it's Syracuse University does a whole, and I can honestly send you a link to this later if you want me to, but they do a whole thing on decision rates of immigration judges across the country. And we have Omaha. Omaha is where our immigration court is, but let's say if you're in a bigger city like Boston or New York City, you're going to have several different types of immigration courts, like a bigger city, bigger state, like New York or California. But you can look at Omaha, and it's like in the 90s, the decision rates. So you can have a really solid case for asylum that otherwise would get approved in another state but get denied in Omaha. And so you have the risk of it's just a really high risk being in court. And you have to make a really solid argument. But even if you make that solid argument, it could not be successful.
So in the first half, you said you served 500 to 1,000. Was that people or households?
That's people. So
Okay.
it's 500 to 1,000 because sometimes it's really hard to count derivatives in those. So let's say if you have a person, the main head of the family, sometimes their derivatives will be included in that case because they're also getting status or they're getting some sort of relief.
Sure. So also going back to some of the first half, since we're getting our last 10 minutes, I'm just going to do some quick answers. Hopefully we can do some of that.
Mm-hmm.
You had said how you partner with different agencies to provide different support and you provide connection points for different points of conflict. And one of those you mentioned was with housing providers. Have you reached out or partnered with the local REOMA group or Real Estate Owners Management Association to then get vetted into their systems to maybe grease the wheels before they have to get to an eviction court or something of that nature?
No, I don't think we have actually, but that's actually a good idea. I would love to learn more about that program. And it's something I can also bring up to our uplift attorney because she's the primary person or the primary contact that works with landlord and tenant issues. The issue with landlord and tenant issues that I have found, and I think that's something that she has talked to me about as well, is that even though you're gonna face the very similar landlords each time that you're in basically in that type of area. So it's particular landlords that are committing these grievances against clients. And so they're pretty much the same or consistent. I can't speak to what individuals right now, but they're pretty much consistent with who's committing these acts.
What kind of describe what grievances are that you're concerned about?
Yeah, like for example, let's say you live in an apartment building, and let's say you're in the middle of winter, for example, and they're not fixing your heat, for example. That's a type of grievance, I would say. Or there's water damage and they haven't repaired something that they should have repaired, and now there's water damage, and then now there's mold, and they won't repair it, and it could be hazardous to live there. That's a situation which landlords haven't fixed, that sort of thing.
And your staff, are they able to contact the health department or building and safety to get these things fixed?
Yeah, so that's something that the uplift attorney works with the client. So mainly setting with the client, but they basically go over all of this with the client, the uplift attorney would.
Well, how successful are you able to be in resolving these issues with landlords that aren't doing their job?
Well, I think it really varies on the landlord, but oftentimes if there's like a cease and desist, they'll listen to that, but sometimes they won't. So sometimes there is a situation where they have to go to court. So it really just depends on the situation.
Okay.
And from your experience, do you think that they would treat someone who was that had either full status or was of a different
Yeah.
class, do you think they would be treated differently, or do you think they're doing it solely because they're undocumented?
So undocumented people are historically easier to take advantage of, whether or not that's labor or whether or not it's their living situation. And oftentimes it's because they don't know the system that they're living in, for example. So they don't know they have certain rights that are available to them, and that's something that the uplift attorney will talk to them about their rights as a tenant, because their rights as a tenant doesn't matter what their status is. So it's something that they go over with them. So it's not just about like direct legal advice, it's also about understanding your legal rights as a tenant and as a person living
It,
in.
it seems like there's this more easy nexus just to report at the building safety. They'll come out and inspect, and then make a determination that could also be done at a different point of reference. But we're getting short on time. I know that we want to ask you to share how people can learn more about you at the very end. But before I get to that, I only have one question, which is, how are you getting out in the community and letting them know that you exist? So if they have issues and if they have questions and how they can get
Yeah.
hold of it.
Yeah, so this year I've really tried to focus on getting myself out there, meeting new people. I know it's something as a as an introvert I tend to struggle with, just getting out there to just talk to new people about the organization. I've also hired a marketer this year, and just to help me expand our people who know about our organization, and that's really helped a lot. And I find people actually being like, "Oh, I know who you are," rather than what they did a year ago. And so I think it has worked. And I've also I'm working on our strategic plan, which is, of course, would expand our individual donor database, and that would also expand people who know about us. I'm also trying to meet with different people and different funders to work on fundraising. So it's just something different that I'm doing, and then I've seen a lot of progress so far. And so that's stuff I'm doing. And I'm hoping in the next year or two, we can actually hold our own event, which we have not done in quite some time. And I would like to have an event for CLIA, for a fundraising event that other organizations do in the community.
So, Mary, tell us how people can contact you if they're interested in helping or if they know somebody who needs help.
Yes. So our website honestly has improved in the past 5 years tremendously. So we have very specific things on our website. For example, we have how to become a client, what you need to do in order to do that. If you want to donate money or anything like that, you can go specifically to our link on our website. We have drop-down menus, very clear drop-down menus on where you can do that. And of course, you can always email us at our main email, which is info, so info at CLIA as in Nebraska, B as in boy.org, so cleaneb.org, so info at cleaneb.org.
And that's also
And
your website address.
Yes, yes. It's also on our website as well. So our
very
website
good.
links all of this.
All right. Well, Mary, thank you so much for coming on and sharing information about your organization. Good luck to you and the good work that you're doing. And so, for our listeners, thank you very much for spending 30 minutes here with Kurt and myself. And we'll see you next week on Our Street.